Hello and welcome to this video, Installing the Ansible Lab. With this course, we have a fantastic lab experience that will allow you to access Ansible and a number of guests either in your web browser or via SSH directly from your system. The environment for this course is hosted on GitHub. If you navigate to the following URL, you'll see the code, and within this are detailed instructions for the setup. Given the variances in operating systems, I will be keeping this page up to date, so I encourage you to read through the entire README just in case there are issues that have been encountered since this video was published. We're going to go through an example setup. I'm using Mac OS X, but this process has been proven to work on Mac OS X, Windows, and Linux. There's some very slight variations for each OS, and I'll be covering that in the video. So firstly, let's take a look at the repository. Okay, so this is the repository, and as I actually mentioned, you can actually see here we have detailed instructions of how to actually set up the course lab. Some things I want to actually bring your attention to. So we need to have both Docker and Docker Compose installed. If you went through the previous videos, you should have this set up already. I recommend that you download and configure this to the Dive into Ansible-Lab folder within your user home directory. If you happen to be on a Mac or a Linux system, or even a Windows system which has Git installed, you should be able to just do a Git clone of this repository direct into your user home directory. If you don't, or you actually prefer to download the repository, you can do so at that URL listed there. Once you've downloaded the repository, extract the Dive into Ansible-Lab folder and place that folder in your user home directory. Within this folder, you should have the docker-compose.yaml file. This validation section is of particular importance, and after you've cloned the repository or you've extracted it via the zip file, please go through and actually check that all of your paths tally up with those listed for the corresponding operating system. After you have this in your home directory, the next thing we need to look at is a file which is called .env. This hidden file .env has all of the configuration for the lab. Now there's a lot of information in there which you don't necessarily need to customize unless you really want to, but there's two lines in particular that we have to modify. These are the config and Ansible_home. So on this page, I've actually given some examples of the various different operating systems. On Mac OS, it's pretty simple. You're actually putting in the full path to the directories. On Windows, because of the way Docker Desktop works, you actually need to specify this with this path of host_mount/c/users. And something to note there, it is actually important that the username and users are in lowercase. On Linux, again, this should be quite simple and you can actually use the full path. Once this has been configured, you can then run the lab by running docker-compose up from either your command prompt or your terminal, directly from the Dive into Ansible-Lab directory. If this goes well, you should then be able to browse in your browser to localhost 1000 and you'll get the portal interface. With this, what I want you to actually try at this point is logging in to Ubuntu-C as the Ansible user with the password of password. If it works, then the lab is configured as expected. If you find that you can't actually log in, there is something wrong with your configuration, and essentially the Ansible user hasn't been set up accordingly as expected. So if you have issues here, what I want you to do is Control C on that, then do a docker compose rm. Then you can update your configuration and you can actually then try that docker-compose up again and see if you can log in as the Ansible user. For those of you on Linux, there is one extra step that you actually need to do, and this is owing to the permissions model for Docker with Linux. So once you're actually logged in as the Ansible user, you just need to do a su-, enter the password of password, and to own the Ansible user for the /shared directory, and then you can exit. Periodically in the future, I will be updating the images as new versions of Ansible come out, and if you wish to actually update those images, you can quite simply do a docker-compose pull. You can remove the lab. Also, if you want to refresh the lab at any point, you can do a docker-compose rm, and the next time you do an up, it will actually refresh the lab. As we're using volumes for the home directories, your data that you actually have there should be persistent. Okay, let's see this in action. I'm going to scroll back up to the top. And because I'm on a Mac system, I'm going to use Git. But like I said, if you wish to, you can just download the zip file. So we go to code, and I'm going to copy this. But if you wish to, you can do the download zip here. And I'm going to go to my terminal. Okay, so I'm here in my terminal. If I do a pwd, you can actually see I'm in /users/James. And what I'm going to do is a git clone on that repository. Again, like I said, if you wish to, you can download the zip file and unzip this, and you'll be in exactly the same situation. Okay, great. So that has done that. Now we can change directory into dive into Ansible-lab. We're going to have a look at that .env file. And within this file, we've got the SSHD port that our lab guests are going to listen on. So if you did actually want to use SSH natively rather than actually using the web interface that's provided, you can actually connect on your local host to those ports, and you'll be able to access the systems direct from there. Then underneath, we've got TTYD, which is the web terminal we're using here, and that has the ports that we're connecting to for each of those. Lastly, at the bottom, so you can see there, line 19, 20, and 22 and 23, these are the ones that we're actually interested in. And in my case, these are already configured, but you will most likely need to modify these if your name is not James and you're not running on a Mac. So make those changes according to the examples which are actually in the repository. And remember, these are going to be different for Windows. In particular, Windows needs that host_mount prefix. Then once you're done, save that. Okay, and what we should be able to do now at this point is a docker-compose up. Okay, brilliant. So that's working. And now if we actually go to our browser, we should be able to browse to localhost:1000. Okay, great. And then we've got the actual starting page, and then go across to Ansible terminal. Click Ubuntu-C. And at this point, you should be able to log in as Ansible with the password of password. Perfect. Now at this point, if it doesn't actually log you in with Ansible and password, there is something wrong with that configuration file. And the reason being, when these images start, they make reference to those directories, and it's part of the configure process that that Ansible user gets set up. So if you actually have a problem at this point, what I actually want you to do is go back to your terminal or your command prompt and press Ctrl C. You can then do a docker-compose rm. And then you can remove those. And then you can tweak your configuration file again, the .env file. And once you're actually happy with that, you can then run a Docker Compose up again. And once you've got that working as expected, it should actually allow you to log in as that Ansible user. Okay, great. So hopefully you've got a working lab environment and you're all set up for the rest of the course. Please join me in the next video, configuring SSH connectivity between hosts.